Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Ali Ingersoll. Durham has paid more than $2 million to a family of a 24-year-old mother who died in a crash that involved a police pursuit. WRAL's investigative journalist, Sarah Krueger, has been looking into this, and she's our guest today. Hey, Sarah, thanks so much for joining me today. This happened back in 2018, so can you do us a favor and help us revisit the story and tell us exactly what happened?
Of course. So I was working here at WRAL when this happened in 2018, and I covered this story a lot at the time. So there was a police pursuit in August of that year in which police were chasing someone who had been accused of stealing a car at gunpoint earlier that day. And the chase was quite a lengthy one, went on for more than 10 minutes, and it went through really populated and busy parts of the city, including right through downtown. And speeds reached around 80 miles per hour, included driving the wrong way down one-way streets downtown. And the pursuit ended when the suspect's car crashed into that of an innocent bystander. That was Brooklyn Maynard. She had the green light at the intersection of Duke Street and Club Boulevard. That's a really busy intersection in North Durham. And her car was T-boned by the suspects, and she died on the scene from those injuries.
Tell me a little about Brooklyn Maynard.
Yeah, so it's so sad, made even worse because she was a single mom raising a 4-year-old daughter, and she was a Durham County detention officer. She was off duty at the time and in her personal car, but someone who really was having an impact on the community. She had just started pretty recently that position as a detention officer. She was really finding, her calling and had a lot of life left to live.
And so 2018, quite a while ago. What has been going on with this case and the story since then? Because obviously it's 2024 now and we're still talking about it.
Yeah, so on the criminal side of things, the driver who hit Maynard, Tamaris Parker, he was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to up to 25 years in prison. That happened in 2019, and we covered it then. And then what we've learned through reporting this story recently is that in 2020, there was a civil process that started. Maynard's family filed a lawsuit, and it was all under seal until just recently, all private. So that's why it's all coming to light right now, and we're doing this story. We found out that the city paid out $2.25 million to Maynard's estate, and it set up a trust for her daughter. That money set up a trust for her daughter, who is now 9 years old.
And you had an opportunity to talk with the lawyers representing her family.
I did, yeah. So Maynard's estate was represented by two Durham lawyers, Donald Strickland and Donald Beskind. And I spoke with them a couple weeks ago about this case, and they talked about how unprecedented this settlement is, saying it's the first time in North Carolina that someone injured in the course of events of a police pursuit has gotten a recovery in a case. So that's really a significant precedent, now being set with the outcome of this lawsuit.
In North Carolina, I feel like it's really difficult to learn how much money police have paid or cities have paid to people. Just talk a little about that in the background there.
Yeah, so it's not something that the parties involved are typically very forthcoming in talking about. And that was, the case here as well. And through a public records request is how this info started coming to light. So this was all previously confidential, private, until a public records request really opened it up and brought all of this into the public eye. So, of course, we're, quite a while after this settlement actually happened, and now learning all of these details about what the outcome was.
All right, we'll have more after this break. Welcome back. So, Sarah, you've reported quite often on police pursuits around our area. I know that when these happen, and you mentioned you were covering this in 2018, you are often one of the first reporters to show up on the scene. For people who have never seen a scene like this, can you kind of describe what it looks like when a law enforcement member is involved in one of these? Is it similar to any other crash, or is there a more in-depth investigation going on?
So I think the investigation into the crash scene itself, when there's an officer-involved crash, it appears pretty similar to what you would see in any deadly crash. Clearly a lot of care and attention going into that investigation. But then, of course, when an officer is involved, that's going to initiate more behind-the-scenes investigations into things like policy. Was pursuit policy followed? Did the officers act appropriately? Things like that. So that's where there tends to be then more layers of an investigation beyond what you would see in a serious crash involving civilians.
Let's dig into the police pursuit policy a little bit. What is Durham's?
Yeah, so in North Carolina, law enforcement agencies set their own pursuit policies. There's not a one-size-fits-all state law or anything that governs that. So in Durham, the General Orders Manual has pages upon pages about pursuit policy, about chases, and when it is and is not appropriate to do them. So what it says is that the decision to chase must be based on an officer deciding that the immediate danger to the public of doing a chase is less than the danger the suspect poses to the public. So it says that officers are allowed to chase when the suspect has committed a violent felony, something like, to include a murder or, in this case, crime involving a gun, and that the officer thinks the suspect poses a threat of serious injury to the public or police if he or she isn't taken into custody right away. So those are the kinds of things that an officer needs to be weighing when they decide, to activate lights and sirens to pursue this chase.
So it's sort of up to the individual police officer if they feel that it rises to that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right.
So you were talking about this chase and this pursuit at the top of our podcast today. And it seemed really chaotic, right? You described going down one-way streets the wrong way, that kind of stuff. That sounds incredibly dangerous. And in this case, it wound up resulting in someone losing their life. So what do we know about how dangerous these are and how often are they happening?
Yeah, so it was definitely controversial. And shortly after the chase, we obtained the body camera video, the dash camera video, and that, really highlighted exactly how this pursuit happened. But in terms of how often these kinds of things are happening, so we don't have numbers of all chases across all agencies, but one of our colleagues here at WRAL did some reporting in 2022 about chases specifically involving the State Highway Patrol, and that showed that they are becoming more and more common. They increased 130% over a 4-year period. In 2022, there were more than 1,000 chases around the state, according to the Highway Patrol, and we're getting a better understanding of fatal ones, too. The San Francisco Chronicle did a big story on this in February and recently made their data available. So nationwide in that time, it shows that in North Carolina between 2017 and 2022, there were 104 fatal crashes involving a law enforcement pursuit. And in the year that Brooklyn Maynard died, 17 other people in North Carolina were killed in the same way. So between 2017 and 2022, 154 people in the state died following pursuits. And the data shows that even during peak COVID years, 2020 and 2021, when most traffic fatalities decreased because people weren't on the roads as much, the number of people who died during police chases was actually higher than in 2019 and 2022. And that's the trend nationwide, too, not just here in our state.
Really interesting and definitely more to dig into there. So finally, let's circle back to Brooklyn Maynard and her family. Other than settlement money, what do they want to see happen?
So the attorneys that I talked to, the two attorneys, said the family, they were happy with the settlement. They wanted to ensure financial security for her little girl moving forward. And there was a video played for the court that the attorneys gave to me, and it included interviews with Brooke's friends and family. It was really hard to watch, really emotional. But it talked about how Brooke's upbringing was pretty financially unstable and just, unstable in her home life, and how that motivated her to want to provide the opposite for her daughter, to want to give her daughter stability. And so the family is hopeful that this settlement will help ensure that. But beyond the settlement and beyond money, there is more that the family wants. They want change in terms of behavior. They want Durham police to exercise more caution when it comes to crashes. And so that is, really one of their big hopes that this settlement will help ensure that moving forward.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining me, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you listen to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL News app, you can also find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow the show so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.